This man lived like royalty when cricket players earned peanuts and died, leaving behind secrets worth millions. Sir Frank Worrell stepped out of his Rolls Royce Silver Cloud in 1965, wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than most people's annual salary. While other cricket players struggled to make ends meet, Frank had already built an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Today, we're uncovering the hidden wealth, royal connections, and untold legacy of cricket's first true gentleman millionaire. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about cricket's golden era. Right now, you're looking at the gates of Frank's former estate in Barbados, a property so exclusive that even today's billionaires couldn't buy it. But this story isn't just about money. It's about a man who transformed himself from a poor kid in Barbados into cricket royalty, then used that status to build generational wealth that his family still enjoys today. By the end of this story, you'll understand how Frank Worrell became the template for every wealthy athlete who came after him. Let me take you back to 1924, when Frank Worrell was born in Bank Hall, Barbados. His father was a dock worker who earned barely enough to feed his family. Their home was a tiny wooden shack with no electricity and no running water. Young Frank slept on a mattress made from old rice bags stuffed with dried grass. The roof leaked during rainy seasons, and the family often went to bed hungry when work was scarce at the docks. The neighborhood was rough, filled with families struggling against the harsh realities of colonial life. Children would fight over fallen mangoes, steal sugarcane from passing carts, and spend their days barefoot in the dusty streets. Violence was common, education was rare, and most boys Frank's age were already working odd jobs by the time they turned 10, their childhoods sacrificed to help their families survive. But even in poverty, there was something different about this boy. He carried himself with dignity that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. While other children in the neighborhood would fight over scraps of food or stolen fruit, Frank would politely decline handouts and instead find ways to earn small amounts of money. By running errands for shopkeepers or helping elderly neighbors with their chores, even as a 6-year-old, Frank displayed an unusual sense of responsibility and pride. When his father came home, exhausted from the docks, covered in sweat and smelling of salt and fish, Frank would have a bowl of water ready for him to wash his hands and face. When his mother worked late into the night by candlelight, mending clothes for wealthy families, Frank would sit quietly nearby, not to play, but to ensure she wasn't alone in the darkness. Frank's mother, Clotilda, worked as a seamstress for wealthy families on the island. She would spend long hours bent over her sewing machine, repairing torn dresses and hemming expensive suits for people who lived in a completely different world. She would bring home stories about how rich people lived, describing their grand houses with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, their fancy clothes made from imported fabrics, and their elegant manners that seemed to come naturally. Clotilda possessed an artist's eye for detail and a storyteller's gift for bringing scenes to life. She would describe the weight of silk in her hands, the intricate beadwork on evening gowns, the way wealthy women moved with practiced grace through their enormous homes. She told Frank about servants who wore uniforms finer than anything his family owned, about dinner parties where more food was served than his family would see in a month, about libraries filled with leather-bound books and studies lined with oil paintings of distinguished ancestors, while other children played cricket with makeshift bats carved from coconut palm branches and balls made from rags. Frank would sit quietly beside his mother and listen to these tales, absorbing every detail. He would ask questions about how these wealthy families spoke, what they ate, how they decorated their homes, and what made them different from ordinary people. His mother noticed that Frank was different from other kids. He never played rough games or spoke loudly. Even as a child, he had the bearing of aristocracy. What Clotilda didn't realize was that she was providing Frank with something more valuable than entertainment. She was giving him a detailed blueprint of a world he would one day inhabit. Every story she told, every detail she shared, was being carefully catalogued in Frank's mind as essential knowledge for his future transformation. When Frank was 8 years old, something happened that changed his life forever. His mother was hired to repair an elaborate ball gown for the governor of Barbados, and the job was so delicate and important that she was allowed to bring Frank along to the governor's mansion for the final fitting. As they walked through the imposing iron gates, past manicured gardens with exotic flowers Frank had never seen before, and into marble halls, decorated with oil paintings of British royalty, Frank didn't gawk like other children would. The mansion was a testament to British colonial power and wealth. Every surface gleamed with polish, every corner was perfectly arranged, and every detail spoke of centuries of refinement and privilege. The servants moved like dancers in a choreographed performance, appearing exactly when needed and disappearing seamlessly when their tasks were complete. The very air seemed different, cleaner, cooler, perfumed with expensive soaps and fresh flowers instead. He studied everything carefully, as if he was memorizing a blueprint for his own future. He noticed how the servants moved silently and efficiently, how the furniture was arranged to create conversation areas, how the governor and his wife spoke in measured tones that commanded attention without raising their voices. He observed the way they held their teacups, the way they walked with perfect posture, and the way they treated each person according to their social station. Frank paid attention to details that would escape most adults. He noticed that the governor never raised his voice, but somehow commanded absolute attention when he spoke. He observed that the finest china was used not just for special occasions, but for everyday tea. He saw that even casual conversations followed unspoken rules of etiquette, with each person knowing exactly when to speak and when to listen. The governor's wife, Lady Margaret Thornfield, noticed Frank's unusual composure and asked his mother about him. Lady Thornfield was a woman of considerable intelligence and social influence, known throughout the Caribbean for her charitable work and her ability to identify promising young people who might benefit from education and guidance. She had sponsored several young men over the years, helping them secure scholarships and opportunities that transformed their lives. When she learned that Frank was intelligent but couldn't afford proper schooling, she made an offer that shocked everyone present. She would pay for Frank's education at Harrison College, the most prestigious school in Barbados, but only if he promised to maintain the highest standards of behavior and achievement. Frank looked Lady Thornfield straight in the eye and made a promise that would shape his entire life. "I will become a gentleman worthy of your investment, and I will use my education to honor both my family and your generosity." The gravity and sincerity with which this 8-year-old boy spoke impressed everyone in the room. Lady Thornfield later wrote in her diary that she had never met a child who possessed such natural dignity and determination. Frank's education at Harrison College was unlike anything other cricket players of his era experienced. The school was modeled after British public schools with strict codes of conduct, rigorous academic standards, and an emphasis on producing leaders who could serve the British Empire with distinction. While his future teammates learned cricket on dusty village grounds with improvised equipment, Frank was studying Latin, French, mathematics, history, and literature alongside the sons of plantation owners, British colonial officials, and wealthy merchants. The transformation was immediate and profound. Harrison College didn't just educate boys, it refined them into gentlemen. Every aspect of daily life was governed by strict protocols designed to instill discipline, character, and social grace. Students wore immaculate uniforms, maintained perfect posture, and spoke only when addressed by their superiors. Meals were formal affairs where proper table manners were as important as academic achievement. But it wasn't just the academic curriculum that transformed. Frank Harrison College taught its students how to be gentlemen in every aspect of their lives. Frank learned to speak with perfect diction, eliminating any trace of local dialect from his voice. He studied proper etiquette for dining, social gatherings, and business meetings. He learned to dress with impeccable style, understanding that clothing was a form of communication that could open or close doors before he even spoke. The school's library became Frank's second home, while other students grudgingly completed their required reading. Frank devoured books on history, biography, economics, and philosophy. He read about successful businessmen, political leaders, and social reformers, studying their methods and strategies with the intensity of a military tactician preparing for battle. He understood that knowledge was power, and he was determined to acquire as much of both as possible. Most importantly, Frank learned how wealthy people think about money, investments, and building lasting wealth. While other children his age thought about money as something you earned and spent, Frank learned to think about money as a tool for creating more money. He studied the biographies of successful businessmen, learned about compound interest and real estate appreciation, and began to understand that true wealth wasn't about having expensive things, but about controlling assets that generated ongoing income. Frank's cricket talent emerged during his school years, but even then, he approached the game differently from his peers. While other talented players saw cricket as a fun activity or a potential way to earn some money, Frank recognized it as a platform for building relationships, demonstrating character, and gaining access to social circles that would otherwise be close to someone from his background. His approach to the game was methodical and strategic. Frank studied the techniques of great players, not just to improve his own performance, but to understand what made them memorable and respected. He practiced not only his batting and bowling, but also his behavior on the field, his interactions with teammates and opponents, and his conduct with spectators and officials. Cricket became Frank's laboratory for testing and refining his transformation from poor boy to gentleman. Every match was an opportunity to demonstrate that he possessed not just athletic skill, but also the character and deportment expected of a true gentleman. He never argued with umpires, never showed frustration when things went wrong, and always treated everyone with respect, regardless of their social status. By age 16, Frank was already different from every other cricket player in the Caribbean. His teammates would arrive at matches in whatever clothes they owned, speak in local dialects, and behave casually with spectators and officials. Frank, however, would arrive impeccably dressed, speak with refined eloquence, and conduct himself with the dignity of someone born into aristocracy. Frank's cricket debut for Barbados in 1941 was not just a sporting event. It was a social occasion where the island's elite came to see this young gentleman who could bat like a prince. Frank didn't just play cricket, he performed it like a theatrical production. His batting was elegant and graceful, with textbook technique that made even the most difficult shots look effortless. His behavior on the field was impeccable, never arguing with umpires or showing frustration when things went wrong. His interactions with fans and officials were always gracious, treating everyone with respect, regardless of their social status. The impact was immediate and extraordinary. Cricket fans had never seen anything like Frank Worrell. Here was a player who combined exceptional skill with impeccable manners, athletic prowess with intellectual sophistication, natural talent with carefully cultivated refinement. He represented something entirely new in the world of cricket, the gentleman athlete who could compete at the highest level while maintaining the highest standards of conduct. Within 2 years, he wasn't just famous in Barbados, he was famous throughout the British Empire. Cricket fans in England, Australia, and India had heard about this remarkable young player from the Caribbean, who combined exceptional skill with gentlemanly conduct. But here's what nobody knew at the time. While other players spent their small cricket earnings on immediate pleasures like clothes, entertainment, and travel, Frank was saving every penny and investing in his long-term development. Frank used his cricket tours as educational opportunities. He would arrive in each new country weeks before his teammates, using the extra time to study local culture, learn basic phrases in local languages, and build relationships with wealthy cricket patrons and influential business leaders. By 1945, Frank could speak fluent English, French, and Spanish. He understood international business, global politics, and high society customs better than most university graduates. This wasn't accidental. Frank approached each international tour like a diplomatic mission, with carefully planned objectives and strategies for achieving them. Before traveling to any country, he would research its political system, economic conditions, social customs, and cultural history. He would identify key individuals he wanted to meet and develop specific plans for approaching and impressing them. Frank understood that in the interconnected world of international cricket, relationships were everything. A casual conversation with a wealthy patron in Sydney could lead to business opportunities in London. A friendship with a diplomat in India could open doors in New York. Frank was building a global network of connections that would serve him throughout his life. The turning point came in 1948, when Frank was selected for the West Indies tour of England. This wasn't just a cricket tour, it was Frank's entrance into British high society. While his teammates stayed in modest hotels provided by the cricket board and ate simple meals at local pubs, Frank had received invitations to stay at country estates, attend royal garden parties, and dine with members of parliament. These weren't coincidences. Frank had spent years cultivating these connections through carefully crafted letters to influential cricket enthusiasts, mutual acquaintances he had met during previous tours, and his growing reputation as cricket's most distinguished gentleman. He understood that in British society, connections were everything, and he had methodically built a network of relationships that would serve him for the rest of his life. During that England tour, Frank made friendships that would last a lifetime and create opportunities that other athletes could never imagine. He was invited to join exclusive men's clubs in London, including the MCC Marylebone Cricket Club and several prestigious gentlemen's clubs in St James's, where membership usually required generations of family wealth and social standing. These clubs became Frank's informal business headquarters, where he learned about investment opportunities, real estate deals, and business ventures that were never advertised to the general public. The conversations in these clubs weren't about cricket, they were about politics, business, and money. Frank would sit quietly in leather armchairs, sipping brandy and listening to discussions about which companies were planning to expand into the Caribbean, which properties in London were likely to appreciate in value, and which government policies would create new business opportunities. He absorbed this information like a sponge, understanding that knowledge was the foundation of wealth. By the early 1950s, Frank had transformed from a cricket player who happened to be wealthy into a businessman who happened to play cricket. His investments spanned multiple continents and industries. He owned properties in London, New York, and Barbados. He held shares in shipping companies, sugar plantations, and emerging technology firms. He had business partnerships with some of the wealthiest families in the British Empire. Frank's business success was built on the same principles that had guided his cricket career: meticulous preparation, impeccable conduct, and strategic relationship building. He approached every investment opportunity with the same careful analysis he had once applied to opposing bowlers. He treated every business partner with the same respect and courtesy he had shown to cricket teammates and opponents. Most importantly, Frank understood that his greatest asset wasn't his cricket talent or his business acumen, but his reputation as a gentleman. In a world where business was still conducted largely through personal relationships and handshake agreements, Frank's character was his most valuable currency. By the time of his death in 1967, Frank Worrell had accomplished something unprecedented. In the world of professional sports, he had transformed himself from a poor dockworker's son into a respected member of international high society. He had built a business empire that provided financial security for his family for generations, and he had done it all while maintaining the highest standards of character and conduct. Frank's influence extended far beyond cricket and business. He became a role model for young people throughout the Caribbean, proving that with education, character, and determination, it was possible to overcome any obstacle. He demonstrated that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth, but about using that wealth to create opportunities for others and to contribute positively to society. The most powerful lesson from Frank's story is that true luxury isn't about having expensive things, it's about having the freedom to live according to your own vision and values. Frank understood that wealth without class is just money, but class without wealth is just pretense. He built both, And that combination made him truly unstoppable. Don't just dream about luxury. Build the character and skills that make luxury meaningful, because true wealth is measured not by what you can buy, but by the positive impact you create that outlasts your lifetime. Frank Worrell understood this truth, and it made him not just rich, but truly great.